Hello, welcome. Alright, we're gonna listen to Henry Ford's Own Story by Rose Wilder Lane.
Chapter 10 of Henry Ford's Own Story. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Howlett. Henry Ford's Own Story by Rose Wilder Lane. Chapter 10. Why not use gasoline? One sympathizes with young Mrs. Ford during the weeks that followed. In 2 years of marriage she had learned to understand her husband's interests and moods fairly well. She had adjusted herself with fewer domestic discords than usual to the simple demands of his good-humored, methodical temperament. She had begun to settle into a pleasant, accustomed routine of managing her house and poultry yard, preparing the meals, washing the dishes, spending the evenings sewing, while Henry read his mechanics journals on the other side of the lamp. Now everything changed. Henry had returned from that trip to Detroit with something on his mind. In reply to her anxious inquiries he told her not to bother. He was all right, a statement that had the usual effect of confirming her fears. She was sure something terrible had occurred, some overwhelming business catastrophe, and Henry was keeping it from her. From the kitchen window she saw him sitting idly on the horse block in the middle of the forenoon, twisting a straw in his fingers and frowning intently at the side of the barn. Sometimes after supper, instead of settling quietly down with his papers, he walked up and down, the sitting room, with his hands behind his back and that same frown on his forehead. At last she could endure it no longer. She begged him to tell her the worst. He replied, surprised, that it was a steam engine. He couldn't figure out the ratio of power to weight satisfactorily. The blamed thing bothered him. "Oh, is that all?" Mrs. Ford said indignantly. "Well, I wouldn't bother about it if I were you. What does an old steam engine matter anyhow? Come and sit down and forget about it." It was the one thing Ford could not do. His mind, once started on the project of building an engine to use on the farm, remained obstinately at work on the details. He spent weeks considering them one by one, thinking out adaptations, new devices, in an effort to overcome the difficulty. Still he could not see how to construct a cheap engine which would pull across his soft fields, carry the necessary weight of water, and still develop enough free power to be useful. He was still struggling with the problem 3 months after his trip to Detroit. "I declare to goodness, I don't know what's got into you, Henry. You act like a man in a dream half the time," the wife said, worried. "You aren't coming down with a fever, are you?" "I should say not," Henry replied hastily, with visions of brewed snake root and wormwood. "I feel fine. Where's the milk pail?" He took it and his lantern and hurried out to the barn, but even while he sat on the three-legged stool, his practiced hand sending streams of warm milk foaming into the pail, his mind returned to that problem of the steam engine. He was sure a machine could be made to do the work of horses. He was confident that he could make it if he persisted long enough. The trouble was the weight of the water. He must have it to make steam. He must have steam to develop power, and the whole power was required to haul the water. It looked like an inexorable circle. He went over it again, looking for the weak spot in the reasoning, and suddenly he saw it. Steam was not necessary. Why not use gasoline? The thought opened a door into unknown possibilities. Up to that time, as far as he knew, no one had ever dreamed of a self-propelling gasoline engine. 1,000 obstacles rose immediately before his mind: the gearing, the drive, the construction of the engine itself, a dazzling array of problems to be faced and solved. Difficulties innumerable stood in the way of his carrying out the idea. Difficulties apparently so insurmountable that 99 men in 100 would have abandoned the idea as impossible after one glance at them. Henry Ford was the 100th man. They were mechanical difficulties, and he loved mechanics. He was eager for the struggle with them. "It seemed to take me a year to finish the chores so I could sit down someplace and figure it out," he says. He finished the milking, fed the waiting circle of gleaming-eyed cats, flashed his lantern down the rows of stalls to be sure the horses were well fed and comfortable, fastened the barn doors, and hastened into the house with the milk. Every moment seemed wasted until he could reach the quiet sitting room, spread paper and pencils in the lamplight, and begin to work out some of those problems. He had never disliked the chores so much. From that time his distaste for farm work grew. Nature would not delay her orderly cycle because Henry Ford wanted to spend his days in the little farm shop. Weeds sprang up and must be cut, crops ripened and must be harvested. Morning came with 100 imperative demands on his time and strength, and night brought the chores. All the farm tasks were to Ford only vexing obstacles in his way to his real work, and they kept him from it till late at night. Then, when all Greenfield was asleep, and Mrs. Ford, after a long struggle to keep awake, had gone yawning to bed, he sat alone and worked over the problems of his gasoline engine. He ransacked the piles of mechanics' journals for suggestions. Where they failed him, he tried to think his way ahead without help. While he worked through the night, in a stillness broken only by the crowing of a rooster in some distant farmyard and the sputtering of the lamp, the possibilities of his idea gradually grew in his mind. He was not an imaginative man. The details of the engine absorbed most of his attention. But now and then, as the night wore on toward morning, he had a dim understanding of the possibilities of horseless transportation. He thought what it might mean to the world if every man had a machine to carry him and his goods over the country at a speed of 20 or even 25 miles an hour. It was a fantastic vision, he admitted, but he set his teeth and declared that it was not an impossible one. Sometimes he worked all night. Usually weariness overcame him in the small hours, and he was forced to stop and go through another day's work on the farm before he could get back to his real interests again. If the farm was to prosper, he must give it his attention every day. The margin of time it allowed for his work on the gasoline engine plans was far too little. By the end of that summer he had made up his mind that he could not spare his time for the farm. He told his wife that he had decided to lease it to his brother and move to Detroit. "My goodness, Henry, what for? We're doing well here. I'm sure you're going ahead faster than anyone in the neighborhood," she said in astonishment. "I want to get back to work in the machine shops. I can't do any work on my gasoline engine here. Even if I had the time, I haven't the equipment," he explained. "Well, I must say, here we've worked hard and got a comfortable home and a fine farm that pays more every year and 16 head of good stock, and you're going to leave it all for a gasoline engine that isn't even built. I don't see what you're thinking of," said poor Mrs. Ford, confronted thus suddenly with the prospect of giving up all her accustomed ways, her old friends, her big house with its stock of linens and its cellar filled with good things. "You can't begin to make as much in the city as you do here," she argued reasonably. "And suppose the engine doesn't work after all?" "It'll work all right. I'm going to keep at it till it does," Ford said. End of chapter 10. Chapter 26 of Henry Ford's Own Story. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Howlett. Henry Ford's Own Story by Rose Wilder Lane. Chapter 26. Making It Pay. When I saw thousands of men in Detroit alone, fighting like wild animals for a chance at a decent living wage, it brought home to me the tremendous economic waste in our system of doing business, Ford said. Every man in those crowds must go back to a job, if he found one at all, that did not give him a chance to do his best work because it did not pay him enough to keep him healthy and happy. I made up my mind to put my project through, to prove to the men who are running big industries that my plan pays. I wanted employers to see that when every man has all the money he needs for comfort and happiness, it will be better for everybody. I wanted to prove that the policy of trying to get everything good for yourself really hurts you in the end." He paused and smiled his slow, whimsical smile. "Well, I guess I proved it," he said. 6 weeks after the plan went into effect in his factory, a comparison was made between the production for January 1914 and January 1913. In 1913, with 16,000 men working on the actual production of cars for 10 hours a day, 16,000 cars were made and shipped. Under the new plan, 15,800 men working 8 hours a day made and shipped 26,000 cars. Again, Ford had shown the value of that intangible, impractical thing, a spirit of friendliness and goodwill. On the ebb tide of the enthusiasm which had stirred this country at the announcement of his profit-sharing plan, 1,000 skeptical opinions arose. "Oh, he's doing it just for the advertising." "He knew right enough that he would make more money in the end by this scheme. He's no philanthropist." Ford wanted his new plan known. He wanted employers everywhere to see what he was doing, how he did it, and what the effects would be. He did expect the factory to run better, to produce more cars. If it had not done so, his plan would have been a failure. "Do the thing that is best for everybody, and it will be best for you in the end." That was his creed. He hoped to prove its truth so that no one would doubt it. Nor is Ford a philanthropist, with the ordinary implications that follow that word. He is a hard-headed, practical man who has made a success in invention, in organization, in the building of a great business. His contribution to the world is a practical contribution. His message is a practical message. "This whole world is like a machine. Every part is as important as every other part. We should all work together, not against each other. Anything that is good for all the parts of the machine is good for each one of them." Or look at it as a human body. The welfare of one part is dependent on all the other parts. Once in a while a little group of cells get together and takes to growing on its own account, not paying any attention to the rest. That is a cancer. In the end, what it takes from the rest of the body causes the death of the whole organism. What do those independent, selfish cells get out of it? I tell you, selfishness, trying to get ahead of the other fellow, trying to take away from other people, is the worst policy a man can follow. It is not a practical viewpoint on life. Any man who is a success because his work has helped other men, whether he realizes it or not. The more he helps other men, the more successful everyone will be, and he will get his share. Putting his profit-sharing plan into effect was not a simple matter of writing the checks. He had to educate not only other employers, but his own men as well. They must be taught the proper way to use money, so that it would not be a detriment to themselves or a menace to society in general. On the other hand, Ford did not believe in the factory systems in use abroad. He did not mean to give each of his workmen a model cottage, with a model flower garden in front and a model laundry in the rear, and say to them, "Look at the flowers, but do not pick them. It will spoil my landscape effect. Look at the lawn, but do not cut it. I have workmen for that." He meant to place no restraints on the personal liberty of the men. He believed that every man, if given the opportunity, would make himself a good, substantial citizen, industrious, thrifty, and helpful to others. He meant his plan to prove that theory also. It has been rumored that the extra share of profits was given with "a string to it." That is not so. There was no single thing a man must have to do to entitle him to his share. He need not own a home, start a bank account, support a family, or even measure up to a standard of work in the shops. Manhood and thrift were the only requisites, and the company stood ready to help any man attain those. The first obstacle was the fact that 55% of the men did not speak English. Investigators visiting their miserable homes were obliged to speak through interpreters. A school was started where they might learn English, and the response was touching. More than 1,000 men enrolled immediately, and when the plan was discussed in the shops, 200 American workmen volunteered to help in teaching, so thoroughly had the Ford spirit of helpfulness pervaded the factory. The paid teachers were dismissed, and now those 200 men, on their own time, are helping their fellow employees to learn the language of their new country. Shortly after the newspapers had carried far and wide the news of Ford's revolutionary theories, a man knocked late one night at the door of the manager's home. "Will you give me a job?" he asked. "Why, I don't know who you are," the manager replied. "I'm the worst man in Detroit," said the caller defiantly. "I'm 54 years old, and I've done 32 years in Jackson prison. I'm a bad actor, and everybody knows it. I can't get a job. The only person that ever played me true is my wife, and I ain't going to have her taking in washing to support me. If you want to give me a job, all right. If you don't, I'm going back to Jackson prison for good. There's one man yet I want to get, and I'll get him." Somewhat nonplussed by the situation, the manager invited the man in, talked to him a bit, and called up Ford. "Sure, give him a chance," Ford's voice came over the wire. "He's a man, isn't he? He's entitled to as good a chance as any other man." The ex-convict was given a job in the shops. For a couple of months his work was poor. The foreman reported it to the manager. The manager wrote a letter, telling the man to brace up. There was plenty of good stuff in him if he would take an interest in the work and do his best. The next morning he came into the manager's office with his wife, so broken up he could hardly hold his voice steady. "That letter's the finest thing outside of what my wife has done that I've ever had happen to me," he said. "I want to stick here. I'll do the best I know how. I'll work my hands off. Show me how to do my work better." A couple of months later he came into the office and took a small roll of bills out of his pocket. "Say," he said, shifting from one foot to the other, and running his fingers around the brim of the hat in his hands, "I wonder if you'd tell me how to get into a bank and leave this, and what bank? I'm wise about how to get in and take it out, but I ain't up to putting it in without some advice." Today that man is living in his own home, which he is paying for on the installment plan, and he is one of the best workers in Detroit, a good, steady man. His chance appearance resulted in Ford's policy of employing convicts wherever his investigators come across them. Nearly 100 ex-criminals, many of them on parole, are working in his shops today, and he considers them among his best men. No policy is any good if it cannot go into a community and take everyone in it, young, old, good, bad, sick, well, and make them all happier, more useful, and more prosperous, he says. Every human being that lives is part of the big machine, and you can't draw any lines between parts of a machine. They're all important. You can't make a good machine by making only one part of it good. This belief led to his establishing a unique labor clearinghouse in his administration building, a department that makes it next to impossible for any man employed in the organization to lose his job. End of chapter 26. Foreword to Henry Ford's own story. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Chapter 27 of Henry Ford's own story. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Howlett. Henry Ford's own story by Rose Wilder Lane. Chapter 27. The Importance of a Job. That surging mob of men outside this factory during the week following the announcement of his profit-sharing plan had impressed indelibly on Ford's mind the tremendous importance of a job. "A working man's job is his life," he says. "No one man should have the right ever to send another man home to his family out of work. Think what it means to that man, sitting there at the supper table, looking at his wife and children, and not knowing whether or not he will be able to keep them fed and clothed. A normal, healthy man wants to work. He has to work to live right. Nobody should be able to take his work away from him. In my factory every man shall keep his job as long as he wants it." Impractical? The idea seems fantastic in its impracticality. What? Keep every man, lazy, stupid, impudent, dishonest as he may be, every man in a force of 18,000 workmen on the payroll as long as he wants to stay? Surely if there is any point at which ideals of human brotherhood end and cold-blooded business methods begin, this should be that point. But Ford, obstinate in his determination to care for the interests of everyone, declared that this policy should stand. As a part of his new plan, he installed the Labor Clearinghouse as part of his employment department. Now when a foreman discharges a man, that man is not sent out of the factory. He goes with a written slip from the foreman to the Labor Clearinghouse. There he is questioned. What is wrong? Is he ill? Does he dislike his work? What are his real interests? In the end he is transferred to another department which seems more suited to his taste and abilities. If he proves unsatisfactory there, he returns again to the clearinghouse. Again his case is discussed. Again he is given another chance in still another department. Meantime the employment managers take an active interest in him, in his health, his home conditions, his friends. He is made to feel that he has friends in the management who are eager to help him make the right start to the right kind of life. Perhaps he is ill. Then he is sent to the company hospital, given medical care and a leave of absence until he is well enough to resume work. Over 200 cases of tuberculosis in various stages were discovered among Ford's employees when his hospital was established. These men presented a peculiar problem. Most of them were still able to work. All of them must continue working to support families. Yet